The first time I saw her in person, she was wearing the earrings I had bought. Not directly, of course. The money had traveled through 3 separate accounts before reaching the boutique where Nathan had purchased them. Delicate teardrop emeralds that caught the light when she moved her head, laughing at something my husband had whispered in her ear. I stood perfectly still behind the potted palm in the hotel lobby, watching as they waited for the elevator. Her hair was copper red, flowing down her back in loose waves, exactly his type. I'd seen the photos already, of course, but seeing her in the flesh made my skin crawl with an electricity I hadn't felt in years. When the elevator doors closed behind them, I sat down heavily on a plush lobby chair, my heart hammering. The diamond on my wedding ring caught the light as I twisted it, a nervous habit I'd developed over 15 years of marriage. I took out my phone and opened the banking app, navigating to the secret account I'd set up 6 months ago. With trembling fingers, I transferred another $5,000. The notification pinged on my screen almost immediately. Payment for apartment 7B processed successfully. I smiled, tucking my phone away. She had no idea who was really keeping a roof over her head. But she would, eventually. The signs had been there for over a year, Nathan coming home later and later. The faint smell of an unfamiliar perfume, the sudden business trips that couldn't be rescheduled. 15 years of marriage teaches you to recognize the patterns. But I had waited, watched, gathered evidence methodically like the financial analyst I was. "Eliza, have you seen my blue tie? The Hermes one?" Nathan called from our walk-in closet. I was sitting at my vanity, applying mascara with careful precision. "Check the dry cleaning bag," I replied, my voice neutral. "You wore it to the Miller account dinner last month." He emerged, tie in hand, and kissed the top of my head absently. I noticed he was wearing the cologne I'd stopped buying him 2 birthdays ago, the one he'd insisted was his signature. Someone else was buying it now. "You're home for dinner tonight, right?" I asked, watching his reflection in the mirror. "I thought we could try that new Italian place in Westwood." "Can't tonight, babe. Emergency partners meeting about the Donovan lawsuit. Might run late." The lie slid off his tongue so easily now. No hesitation, no telltale blush creeping up his neck like when he'd first started cheating. "Of course," I said, smiling thinly. Rain check. He was already checking his phone, not looking at me. "Absolutely. Next week for sure." When I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I walked to his office and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk with the key I'd had replicated. The credit card statements were neatly filed. Nathan had always been meticulous with financial records, a trait we shared. I flipped through them, noting all the charges I'd already cataloged. Dinner for 2 at Maison Laurent on nights he was working late, jewelry purchases from boutiques I never received gifts from, hotel charges in neighborhoods where no business client would stay. But it was the apartment lease I'd found 3 months ago that had given me the idea. Nathan wasn't just having an affair. He was setting this woman up in a luxury apartment in Silver Lake. And he was doing it with our money, or rather, with my money. As the financial partner in our marriage, I had always managed our investments, our retirement accounts, our property holdings. Nathan had built his law practice with my family's money, though he preferred to forget that detail now. When I'd discovered the apartment lease for one Violet Chen, I could have confronted him. I could have filed for divorce. Instead, I'd done what I do best. I followed the money. It hadn't been difficult to gain control of the situation. A casual mention to Nathan that I'd noticed some irregular spending patterns and wanted to reorganize our accounts for tax purposes. A suggestion that I take over managing the payments for his investment property in Silver Lake. He'd been so eager to keep me from looking too closely that he'd agreed to everything within a month. I was the one paying Violet Chen's rent, utilities, and credit card bills. Nathan thought he was still supporting his mistress, but the money was coming from an account he no longer monitored. My account. I pulled up the private investigator's latest report on my laptop. Photos of Nathan and Violet at restaurants, walking hand in hand through farmers' markets, entering her apartment building together. Reports of their conversations, overheard in public spaces. Details of her life. 29 years old, a graphic designer who worked from home, originally from Seattle, no family in Los Angeles. In one photo, they sat on a park bench, and he was looking at her the way he used to look at me, with wonder, with hunger. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of wine. The house felt cavernous around me, filled with expensive furniture we'd chosen together, art we'd collected on our travels. 15 years of building a life that now felt like an elaborate stage set. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Caroline. "Still on for lunch tomorrow?" "Want to hear all about the charity gala?" I texted back, "Absolutely." Noon at Lavender and Honey. Caroline was the only person who knew what I was planning. Not all of it. Even she would think I'd gone too far. But she knew about the affair, about my suspicions. "Leave him," she'd urged. "Take him for everything he's worth." But that wasn't enough. Not for the humiliation, the years of lies. Not for making me question every memory, every moment of happiness we'd shared. No. Nathan and his precious Violet deserved something more creative than a simple divorce. The next phase of my plan had begun 2 weeks ago, when I'd sent Violet an email from a fabricated account, presenting myself as a wealthy art collector impressed with her digital portfolio, which I'd studied extensively online. I'd commissioned a series of pieces for my corporate headquarters, offering to pay her triple her usual rate. She'd been ecstatic, judging by her reply. We'd been corresponding regularly since then. I'd learned her hopes, her financial worries, her dreams of opening her own gallery someday. I'd begun to hint that I might be interested in investing in such a venture with the right talent. In her last email, she'd mentioned that her boyfriend was reluctant to discuss her career goals, preferring to take care of her while she developed her portfolio. "He's generous," she'd written, "but sometimes I feel like it comes with invisible strings." She had no idea. Tomorrow, we would meet in person for the first time. Me as Catherine Reynolds, the art collector, not Eliza Harmon, the wife. I'd chosen a restaurant across town from anywhere Nathan might go for lunch. I would finally see up close what kind of woman could make my husband risk everything we'd built together. That night, I lay awake beside Nathan, listening to his steady breathing. I remembered when the sound had comforted me, when his presence in our bed had made me feel safe. Now I felt nothing but a cold calculation, counting down the days until everything would change. I reached for my phone and navigated to my banking app again. I scheduled another payment, this time to the credit card I knew Violet used for her daily expenses. A generous amount, enough to make her feel secure, to make her believe in her future with Nathan, a future I was already dismantling, piece by piece. "Your work shows remarkable depth," I said, sipping my sparkling water as I studied the portfolio spread across our table, especially this series on urban isolation. Violet Chen tucked a strand of copper hair behind her ear, the emerald earring catching the light, and smiled with genuine pleasure. "Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to capture." Up close, she was even more beautiful than in the photographs. Luminous skin, intelligent eyes, an unaffected grace in her movements. Younger than me by almost 15 years, but not the brainless trophy I'd imagined when I first discovered the affair. That would have been easier to dismiss. "You mentioned wanting to open your own gallery someday," I prompted, closing her portfolio and signaling for the check. "Tell me more about that vision." As she spoke animatedly about creating spaces for emerging artists, about democratizing the art world, I found myself listening with genuine interest. In another life, we might have been friends, this passionate young woman and I. The thought made something twist painfully in my chest. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, stopping mid-sentence. "I'm rambling. My boyfriend says I get carried away talking about this stuff. Your boyfriend doesn't support your ambitions?" I asked carefully. Violet's expression clouded. "He does in his way. He's just established. Successful. I think he worries that if I get too independent, I won't need him anymore." She laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Which is silly, because what I feel for him isn't about what he provides." I nodded, maintaining my Catherine Reynolds smile while Eliza Harmon's heart pounded. Men often confuse caretaking with love. Exactly. Her eyes lit up with recognition. He's so determined to handle everything, my rent, my expenses. It was romantic at first, but lately... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. Lately, you've been wondering if it's about control, I finished for her. Her eyes met mine, startled. Yes, how did you know? I've been there, I said simply. And it was true, not in the way she might interpret it, but true nonetheless. In the early years of our marriage, Nathan had been so proud, so determined to prove he could support us without my family's money. That pride had twisted into something uglier over time, a resentment that had corroded the foundation of our relationship. As we walked out of the restaurant together, Violet said, "This is going to sound strange, but I feel like I can talk to you, like you understand things I've never said out loud." "Not strange at all," I replied, touching her arm lightly. Sometimes strangers see us more clearly than the people closest to us. We parted with plans to meet again the following week to discuss the commission further. As I watched her walk away, I felt an unexpected pang of guilt. She was collateral damage in a war she didn't even know was being waged. But when I returned home that afternoon, I found Nathan in his home office arguing with someone on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "I told you, I'm handling it," he was saying. "She doesn't suspect anything. No, the transfers will continue. Listen, Violet. You need to trust me on this." I froze outside the door, my breath catching in my throat. "The house will sell for at least $3 million, he continued. "Once the divorce is final, we won't have to hide anymore. Just be patient for a few more months." The blood roared in my ears. He wasn't just having an affair. He was planning to leave me, to sell our home, to use the proceeds to fund his new life with Violet. All while I'd been carefully orchestrating my elaborate revenge. I moved silently away from the door and went upstairs to our bedroom. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint investment accounts. The balances were significantly lower than they should have been. Transfers had been made to accounts I didn't recognize. Nathan had been moving money, our money, in preparation for his exit. I sat on the edge of our bed, a strange calm settling over me as the initial shock faded. So Nathan and Violet had their own plans. My husband was stealing from me while I was secretly funding his mistress. It was almost poetic in its twisted symmetry. But there was a crucial difference. Nathan was breaking the law. I had documentation of every legitimate transaction, every account in my name. I had emails, financial records, evidence of his transfers. As a corporate financial analyst specializing in fraud detection, I knew exactly what constituted embezzlement, and I knew exactly how to prove it. I heard Nathan's footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed my laptop, composing my features into the mask of indifference I'd perfected over the past year. "You're home early," he said from the doorway, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "How was lunch with Caroline?" "Illuminating," I replied, returning his smile with one of my own. "Very illuminating." That night I made a decision. The game had changed, and so must my strategy. It was time for Catherine Reynolds to make Violet Chen an offer she couldn't refuse, and for Eliza Harmon to prepare for war. The gallery space was perfect. High ceilings, industrial beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the arts district. I watched Violet's face as she walked through it, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. I can't even imagine affording a space like this," she said, running her hand along a white wall. "Not for years." "That's why I've brought you here," I said, my voice echoing in the empty space. "I believe in investing in talent. Your talent, specifically." Over the past 2 weeks, I'd accelerated my plan. As Catherine Reynolds, I'd convinced Violet that I wanted to bankroll her dream gallery, featuring her as the inaugural artist and creative director. I'd shown her projections, introduced her to industry contacts, actually friends of Caroline's in the art world who'd agreed to help me, and steadily built her trust. Meanwhile, as Eliza Harmon, I'd been meticulously documenting Nathan's financial maneuvers, building an airtight case of fraud and embezzlement. I'd consulted with a divorce attorney, the most ruthless one in Los Angeles, without telling Nathan. Everything was in place. I don't understand, Violet said, turning to me with confusion. Why would you do this for me? We barely know each other, I smiled. Sometimes we recognize something in another person, a reflection of ourselves, perhaps. I see in you the artist I might have been, had I made different choices. It wasn't entirely a lie. In college, before I'd met Nathan, before I'd followed the practical path into finance, I'd studied photography. I'd been good enough for a professor to suggest I pursue it professionally. But my parents had scoffed at the idea, and eventually I'd convinced myself they were right. I still can't believe it, Violet said, walking to the windows. Wait until I tell Nathan. Nathan? I asked, though I knew exactly who she meant. My boyfriend, she said, her excitement dimming slightly, though I'm not sure how he'll take it. He likes being the one to provide. I moved to stand beside her at the window. Tell me about him. She hesitated, then said, He's older. Established in his career. Married. She glanced at me, gauging my reaction. I know how that sounds. I'm not here to judge your personal life, I assured her. Though I am curious, does his wife know about you? No, Violet said quickly. He's planning to leave her soon. He says she's cold, career-obsessed. That they haven't really been a couple for years. She looked down. I know that's what they all say. But with Nathan, I believe it. He's just waiting for the right time to tell her. I felt a cold fury rising inside me, but kept my expression neutral. And in the meantime, he pays your bills. He insists on it, she said defensively. I've told him I can support myself, but he says it makes him happy to take care of me. She paused. Though lately there have been issues with some payments. He says his wife watches their accounts too closely. That must be stressful for you, I said softly. It is. She turned to face me fully, which is why this opportunity means so much. If I had this gallery, I wouldn't need to depend on him. I could stand on my own, I nodded slowly. Independence is powerful. But before we finalize anything, I should be transparent about something. I reached into my bag and removed a manila envelope. I've been less than honest about who I am. Violet's expression shifted to wariness. What do you mean? I handed her the envelope. My name isn't Catherine Reynolds. She opened it hesitantly and pulled out the contents. Photographs of her and Nathan together. Bank statements showing transfers from my account to hers. Copies of her lease with my name highlighted as the current payer. Her face drained of color as understanding dawned. You're his wife. Eliza Harmon, I confirmed. Yes. She backed away from me, the papers clutched in her trembling hands. This is insane. You've been stalking us? Paying my bills? Why would you— Do you know what's insane, Violet? I interrupted calmly. Discovering that the man you've built a life with for 15 years is planning to steal your money and run away with someone half your age. That's insane. I don't know what Nathan told you, but I never— Please, I said, holding up a hand. Let's not pretend you're entirely innocent here. You knew he was married. You chose to begin a relationship with him anyway. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Are you going to tell him about this? She gestured between us. About Catherine Reynolds? That depends, I said, on what happens next. Violet's phone began to ring. She glanced at it, and I saw Nathan's name on the screen. Her eyes darted to mine, panicked. Answer it, I said. Put it on speaker. After a moment's hesitation, she complied. Hey, beautiful. Nathan's voice filled the empty gallery. Just checking in about dinner tonight. The reservation's at 8. Violet's eyes remained locked on mine. Can we reschedule? Something's come up with the commission I'm working on. Everything okay? He sounded distracted, and I recognized the sound of his office in the background, the faint hum of conversations, phones ringing. Actually, no, Violet said, her voice steadying. I just found out something disturbing about my client. I raised an eyebrow, impressed by her boldness. What's that? Nathan asked, his tone sharpening with interest. She's not who she claimed to be. Violet took a deep breath. Kind of like how you're not who you claim to be, Nathan, A beat of silence. What are you talking about? I know you're planning to leave your wife, Violet continued, her voice growing stronger. But did you also plan to steal from her? Because that's what she's just shown me proof of. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Violet, who are you with right now? Your wife, she answered. Eliza, I heard him inhale sharply. Put her on. I stepped closer to the phone. Hello, Nathan. Eliza, he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. Whatever you think is happening, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I cut him off. I understand that you've been transferring funds from our joint accounts to private ones in preparation for leaving me. I understand that you've been manipulating this young woman with promises of a future together while lying to both of us. We need to talk, he said urgently. Just you and me. This isn't… You should know, I interrupted again, that I've already spoken with the police about the financial fraud. And my attorney has prepared divorce papers citing your embezzlement of marital assets. They'll be delivered to your office this afternoon. You're bluffing, he said, but I heard the fear beneath his bravado. Am I? I asked calmly. Check your email. I've just sent you copies of everything I've given to the authorities. You have about 2 hours before they arrive at your firm with a warrant. I ended the call and looked at Violet, whose face had gone through a rapid succession of emotions. Shock, betrayal, anger, and now a wary calculation. He was stealing from you, she said quietly, and planning to leave you. Yes, and you've been… What, playing me? Setting me up as part of some elaborate revenge scheme? I sighed. Initially, yes. I wanted to hurt him by taking away the thing he valued, you. But then I met you, and it became more complicated. Because you realized I'm an actual person with feelings? Her voice was bitter. Because I realized we have more in common than I expected, I said honestly. We've both been deceived by the same man. The difference is I can protect myself. I'm not sure you can. She looked around the gallery space, her expression hardening. So this was all fake? The commission, the gallery, your interest in my work. The gallery is real, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. This space is available for lease. My offer to invest in your talent is genuine. She stared at me. Why would you still want to do that? After everything? I considered the question carefully. Because destroying you won't give me back what I've lost. But helping you become independent from Nathan, that feels like justice of a different kind. You're suggesting we work together? After you lied to me for weeks? I'm suggesting we both stop letting Nathan Harmon determine our futures, I said. You have talent, Violet. Real talent. It would be a shame to see it wasted because you tied yourself to the wrong man. She was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. Finally, she turned back to me. If, and it's a big if, I considered this, there would have to be rules. Complete honesty from now on. No more manipulations, I nodded. Agreed. And I need time to think. To process all of this. Of course. Violet gathered her portfolio and the envelope I'd given her. At the door, she paused. You know he'll try to talk his way out of this. He'll say you're crazy, vindictive. That you set him up? I'm counting on it, I said with a grim smile. The more he struggles, the deeper he'll sink. After she left, I remained in the empty gallery space, imagining it filled with art, with people, with a future I hadn't planned for. My phone began buzzing incessantly. Nathan, no doubt cycling through panic, anger, and eventually, desperate negotiation. I switched it off and walked to the windows, watching the city lights begin to glow as dusk settled over Los Angeles. For the first time in over a year, I felt something like peace. 6 months later, the gallery opening was crowded beyond expectations. Critics, collectors, and curious art lovers packed into the renovated industrial space. Violet moved confidently among them, discussing her work with an assurance I couldn't help but admire. The emerald earrings were gone, replaced by simple silver studs that better matched her new, more authentic style. I kept to the periphery, observing the success of our unlikely partnership. The placard at the entrance read, Emergence Gallery, Violet Chen, founder and creative director with Harmon Arts Foundation, listed as the principal investor. I'd decided to keep my married name for the foundation, a small act of reclamation. Quite a triumph, Caroline said, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of champagne. I still can't believe you went into business with your ex-husband's mistress. Former mistress, I corrected, accepting a glass. And it's more accurate to say she went into business with her ex-boyfriend's former wife. Caroline shook her head. Only you could turn such a mess into something like this. Across the room, I caught Violet's eye. She nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement that had become our private communication over months of cautious collaboration. We weren't friends, too much lay between us for that, but we'd found a fragile respect in the aftermath of Nathan's betrayal. He'd taken a plea, deal on the fraud charges, community, service and restitution rather than jail time, thanks to his firm's connections. His reputation, however, was irreparably damaged. He'd moved to Phoenix, last I'd heard, starting over with a smaller firm and presumably less ambitious targets for his manipulation. Have you spoken to him since the divorce was finalized? Caroline asked, following my thoughts as she often did. No, I replied. There's nothing left to say. The settlement had been remarkably favorable to me. Nathan's lawyers had advised him to concede to almost all my terms once they saw the financial evidence. I'd kept our house, though I'd sold it immediately, unable to live with the memories it contained. The proceeds had funded the foundation, along with a portion of my divorce settlement. Ms. Harmon? A young woman in wire-rimmed glasses approached us, notepad in hand. I'm with Art Forum. Would you mind answering a few questions about the foundation and its decision to launch with such a controversial artist? Caroline raised an eyebrow and slipped away, leaving me to handle the press. Something I'd become surprisingly comfortable with over the past few months. Certainly, I replied. Though I wouldn't describe Ms. Chen's work as controversial so much as unflinchingly honest about human connection and betrayal. Some might say there's a personal element to your partnership with Ms. Chen, the reporter pressed. Given your shared history with Nathan Harmon? I smiled, prepared for this line of questioning. The foundation invests in artists whose work speaks to authentic human experience. Ms. Chen's exploration of trust, deception, and resilience resonated with our mission. The personal narratives behind the art are secondary to its quality and impact. After answering a few more questions, I excused myself and made my way toward the central installation, a mixed-media piece titled Invisible Strings. It featured suspended threads connecting various objects, a wedding ring, a credit card, keys to an apartment, a man's watch. At the center was a mirror, positioned so that viewers saw themselves entangled in the web of connections. What do you think? Violet asked, coming to stand beside me. 2 on the nose? It's perfect, I said honestly. Beautiful and uncomfortable at the same time. She studied my reflection in the mirror. I've been meaning to ask you something. That first day when you showed me the evidence about Nathan, you could have destroyed me along with him. Why didn't you? I considered her question, searching for the truth rather than the neat explanation I usually offered to outsiders. I think I recognized that we were both victims of the same manipulation, just in different ways. Punishing you wouldn't have healed anything. And this does? She gestured to the gallery around us. Heal things, I mean. No, I admitted. But it creates something new from the wreckage. That's as close to healing as most of us get. Violet nodded, understanding in her eyes. The review in the Times called our partnership the most unexpected collaboration in the LA art scene. If they only knew. Let them wonder, I said with a small smile. The truth is rarely as interesting as the stories people tell themselves. As the evening wore on, I found myself on the rooftop terrace, taking a moment away from the crowds. The city spread out before me, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. My phone buzzed with a text from my date, a literature professor I'd been seeing casually for a few months. Nothing serious but pleasant, impressed by the opening. Ready when you are for dinner. I texted back that I'd meet him in 30 minutes, then put my phone away. Below me, through the skylights, I could see Violet conducting a tour for a group of influential collectors. Her gestures were animated, her passion evident even from a distance. The last time I'd seen Nathan? At the final divorce hearing, he'd asked me why I'd chosen to help Violet instead of ruining her along with him. She was just as guilty, he'd said, genuinely puzzled. She knew I was married. The difference, I'd told him, is that she was capable of growth, of remorse. You never were. He'd had no answer for that. Now, as I watched the success of the gallery we'd created from the ashes of his deception, I felt a complex satisfaction. Not happiness exactly. The wounds were still too fresh for that. But a vindication of a different sort than I'd initially sought. I'd wanted revenge. What I'd found instead was reinvention. When I rejoined the party downstairs, Violet was finishing her speech, thanking the attendees and her supporters. Our eyes met briefly as she acknowledged the Harmon Arts Foundation, and I saw in her expression the same complicated gratitude I felt toward her. An acknowledgement that through our shared pain, we'd each found a path forward that neither of us could have anticipated. Later, as I left with my date, I passed the installation again. The mirror caught my reflection. Older than Violet, but standing straighter now. The weight of pretense finally lifted from my shoulders. The invisible strings that had once bound me to Nathan, to a marriage built on illusions, had been cut. I was free, moving forward into a future that, for the first time in years, belonged entirely to me.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.